All right, and good morning, and welcome to today's episode of Truly Foundation with your truly foundational host, Oliver Blue. And I am so delighted to be here with you today, acting in the role uh, of a host and a guide and a teacher and a coach. And we're actually going to be doing some commentary on a new section that we're starting with um, in the Course in Miracles as we move closely down to the finish line. We only have like 30 more lessons, 30 plus more lessons. And we started out with 65 lessons over a year and a half ago. And we're still on this journey. And it's been a great journey. Today, we're going to be looking at the beginning of a new section, and it answers a question that we've all asked ourselves, or we've all heard the term mentioned. And so today, we're going to be looking at what the courses uh, says about the ego, or what is the ego. If you have not noticed, but that this Course in Miracles has been written on the level of the mind. It's been written on the level of our psychological self, which includes the mind. The main focus of this course, the main focus of this tool that helps us to come to understand our identity, who we are, how we function, how we come to really discover our true nature and essence. Well, it is written at pretty much on a psychological level. Why? Because basically that is the operating system in which we use in this world. Your life, your lifestyle, your life experience, for the most part, originate and take place within your invisible self or the invisible world before you ever experience it in the external. And then in that invisible world, we can refer to as the world of the mind, or the world, the psychological self. And so this entire course is written from a point of view of a psychoanalysis. Why? Because again, the way we relate to the physical and invisible world basically is through our psychological self, or uh, our mental capacities. So, ta-da! If that is a revelation to you, if that's an aha moment for you, and it only tells me or tell any logical person that if that be the case, then I need to understand my psychological self. I need to understand my mental self. There are so many challenges in the world right now. There's so many people that are laboring and suffering under what they call mental health. Why is that? It's because people don't understand their psychological self. They don't understand the mind. They don't understand how the mind works. They don't understand what it's for. Our mind is like a tool. Our mind, just like the body, it's a tool that been given to us to use in our human experience, in service for the full expression of our true self, in service for having the experiences that we'd love to have, in service for this discovery of who we really are. And so that's why we believe, and we're confident that what we're sharing here is relevant to all of us. This is not religion. This is not information that has no impact on you. No, where we're coming from is we're coming from your very own self, your very own essence. Well, how do I know that? Because we share the same self. We share the same essence. I know through experience how these functions and features that we have, like a physical body and a mental mind and a mental self and a psychological self. I know through experience. And also now I know through expanded awareness, purpose, function, and that it's all shared. It's not these 8 billion individual minds and selves that we appear to be. But for the most part, we're all sharing the same consciousness, the same awareness. And so what you think is private to you is not private to you. What you think is personal to you, it is not personal to you. You are not on an island on your own. And that's the whole idea of an ego. The ego idea is that we're these separate selves on an island by ourselves to survive on our own, to fend for oneself, to be in defense of all other selves. And that idea or that perception of this way of being comes from not knowing. It comes from ignorance or ignorance or ignoring the truth. But we're here to bring the truth that is true always, so that all humanity globally around the world, that's why we're on this platform, because it goes around the world. Everyone in the world has access to this. Why? Because it's relevant. This is information that has been held back in time past, but it's now been made revealed. And it's information that the majority of us did not have, did not get, is not exposed to. But we are here as Truly Foundation with the sole purpose of helping all humanity to awake to the reality of who they are and how you are and why you are and how you function and what the will is for your life, because we all share the same will, the one will of God. And it results in our happiness and our fulfillment. It's not out there. It's not in another idea. There's only one reality, and we are a part of that reality. We share that reality. Indeed, we are family. Indeed, we are brethren and sisters. Indeed, we are of one blood, of one nation. And as soon as we get this and accept this collectively, will be the sooner you see the world become this oasis of love, because the love is already here. All the ingredients that it takes for the world to become the light in which it is already here. It penetrates, it permeates, and it fills all the interspaces of the universe. And we're here in the middle of this. It's like we're all swimming in this one huge ocean called love. But there has been a block or a veil or a lack of awareness that keeps us from that love. But we are here to remove the block, remove the veil, remove the ignorance, to remove the fear, the pain, the suffering, to remove the whole idea of you being something that you are not, and to share with you who you are, who we are as one in God. There's only one of us. And we use the term God to describe that one of us, or we use the term Christ to describe that one of us, the one self, the one life, the one breath, the one being that we all share. We are one, as Frankie Beverly says. No matter what happens, we are one. We cannot undo that. There's not a government. There's not a religion. There is not an idea that can ultimately untopple what and who and why we are. We can try it, but we won't like it. We can try to be that which we're not. We can try to live in separation and division. It only brings on pain and suffering and confusion and lack of clarity. But what I'm talking about brings about the clarity that we all are looking for. And that is that we are one. No matter what it looks like, no matter what it feels like, no matter what it sounds like, tastes like, we are one. One in God, one in essence. And we are eternally one. It can never be separate. It can never be divided. It can never be broken into the billions of pieces that it appears. No matter of what the signs and the sounds and the sights of this world may try to teach us, or the systems of this world, or the traditions of this world, or the history of this world. Just because it happened over and over and over again, and to many people or to the majority, that doesn't make it true. That doesn't make it true. And so what I'm going to do here, because if I don't do this, we'll keep blanking out. So let me do this. I'm going to go here. You don't see it on your side, but I see it. I keep blanking out. And I'm going to go here to my lock screen, and I'm going to say never. Never. And now we should be good. All right, here we go. All right, a little technical adjustment there. So today, what is ego? We're going to discover that today. We're going to go a little in depth into that. Well, when we hear the word ego, all of us have an idea from what we've learned, from what we've experienced about an ego. You hear people say, man, that's your ego talking. Or that you are egotistical. Or we describe certain people as being egotistical, meaning having a complex about themselves, or an idea about themselves that causes them to think in a way that they are, number one, separate, different, and is based on a comparison, and superior. And we even have egos that think that they are inferior. When you think that you are inferior to another, or even superior to another, both of them are egotistical ideas. But in general, when you go to look up the definition for ego, it says that the ego is simply our identification. It is simply the way we perceive ourselves. It's our identification. It said it is who we believe that we are. Based on what, though? Our identification, our belief of who we are, based on what? What's the basis of our identity? What is the basis for who we believe that we are? Is it coming from a place of reality, or is it coming from a place of unreality? That is the question. Where is it coming from? Where is the idea of your identity and of your belief coming from? What is the source of it? That's really the bigger question to ask. What's the source of your ideas, your thoughts, your beliefs? And here it says the ego is simply our identification, who we believe that we are. It says that the ego encompasses all of our fears. It includes our fears. It includes our insecurities. It includes our doubts, as well as what leads us to believe that we're better and or inferior to other people. So it is a perception. It is an idea. It is a perception about ourselves, about our identity, and about our, what we believe about ourselves. And we know and understand now the word perception comes from the idea of interpretation. So it's not a direct piece of information. The word perception is founded in duality, where one thing interprets another. So it would be like the dog looking at the cat and interpreting the cat based from the dog's perspective. So it wouldn't be an accurate perception, right? It would be like the human being looking at the sun and defining the sun from the perspective of the human being. It wouldn't be quite a direct or an accurate definition, but it would be secondhand. Right? It would be like the picture or the painting that was painted by the artist telling the artist about the picture, when indeed it is the artist that knows exactly what the intent, what the purpose, what the capacity, what the potential of the picture is not the picture. It would be like humanity telling its creator what it is, when humanity didn't make itself but humanity, or may I say it, put it this way, that which God created that reflects itself through humanity didn't make itself. It is a creation of God. But it would be humanity defining itself from a point of view of its human experience and not defining itself from the point of view of the intent or from the place of creation from which the intent of the creator created what he created. And so it's an individual sense. The ego is an individual sense. And this is coming from like a psychological point of view. It's an individual sense of self. It's an individual sense of how you define yourself based on how you experience yourself, or a perception of your identity. But it's not based on the creator or the creation. And remember, we talked about creation in the last section, and we said that creation is every thought of God that he has towards his creation. And we eventually said that creation is you. Creation is every thought of God as it pertains to you and all humanity. Why is it important that it's every thought of God? Because God is the creator. God is the originator. God is the source of all life. And the life that we experience is the life of God. It's not a separate life. The life that you experience and any other human being or living thing experience, it is the life of God that is the source of it, and not the individual life itself. And so one's thoughts or one's belief in being inferior or superior is based on a comparison. This is a good basic idea of ego on just a psychological level. It helps us to understand that it is not a true source. It is not a source that you can count on. How can you determine your value, your superiority or inferiority to that which God created? How can you do that? Where did you get the authority? Where did you get the accurate information to do it? And so, what does the Course says? What does the Course in Miracles say about what is ego? I don't think when you read other, uh, for instance, when you read the Christian writings or when you read the Bible, I don't even think the word ego is even mentioned. But the whole idea of this self that is separated, the whole idea of this self that is misaligned, this whole idea of this self that is what the scripture calls a sinner or in sin. this self that has this idea that it is an enemy to its creator, and that there is an enemy that is also an enemy to its existence. And they use terms, we use terms like devil or demons, right? All these ideas of what we get for scripture, but you don't see the word ego. You don't see the word ego. We're going to break this down. We're going to go in depth with it so you'll know where this idea came from, what this idea is, and how to put it in the proper perspective. So it says, what is the ego? Remember, we said what questions are very high quality questions. What is it? It says the ego is idolatry. It starts right there. The ego is idolatry. It's basically, it is an idol that we make of ourselves. It's a devotion that we make to ourselves. It says the ego, it is idolatry. It is the worshiping or the devotion to an idea that is not real. Basically what it means. It is a devotion to unreality. We're devoted to unreality. We're devoted to that which is no source. It has no source of its own. In other words, we are devoted to our own making. It is not the creation of God. It's not every thought of God, but it's what we have created. It's what we have made. So we become devoted to what we've made, which is temporary. It's not permanent. It's not eternal. And so here is defined as idolatry. And we do it all the time. It's not no, sacrilegious thing. I mean, it's just a part of what we do when we don't know. Or when we ignore what we do know. Because we know a lot of stuff that we ignore. We've heard a lot of things that could change our life, and we choose to ignore it and be devoted to ignorance. That is idolatry. See, idol worship is not based on something in form. Idol worship has its origin in our thoughts, in our ideas about ourselves and about others and about God and about the world and about life. It is our point of view. If your point of view is not coming from the Creator and His creation, it is not real. So it says the ego is idolatry. You can write that down. It is the sign. It is a sign. It is the sign of limited and separated self. It is a sign of a limited and a separated self. That's what ego is, a sign. Notice now, the ego is not real. It's what we make up. So it becomes a sign or a signpost of a limited and separated self. Because in reality, there is no limited self. There is no separated self. There's only the one big S self. And we are a part of that. That is real. That is what is real. That is what is permanent. That is what is infinite and eternal. But when we choose to devote or give our devotion or our allegiance to a small S self, that number one is not real. That number two, it is limited And number three, that it believes that it's separate. It believes that it is separate. It believes that it has become an identity and a belief system that is a substitute for reality. That's all it is. And so it says the ego is idolatry. It is the sign of limited and separated self that is born, and this is what it believes, and this is what is a sign of. It is the sign of a limited and a separate self that is born in a body. The birth of a body has now become the identity of that which was before there was a body. Because remember, we know we existed before we was formed in our mother's womb. As God told Jeremiah, he was telling us that I knew thee, Jeremiah, even before you was formed. And so in other words, our true identity, our true reality is formless and timeless. We existed before the world was, before the foundation of the world, before there was an idea of time and space and forms and objects in a world, in physicality. What went before that is what sustains that. It's where that which is got its beginning or its origin or its power from. We're talking about going beneath the surface. We're not talking about golden eggs here. We're talking about the goose that produces the golden egg. We're talking about the source of life. We're talking about life itself. We're talking about the original, the beginning. We're not talking about a trust fund, but we're talking about the one who is the source of the trust fund. That's why I love this foundation that we have established, because it's about the foundation. It is about the beginning. It is about the source. It is about the originality. It is about the mind of God. It's about every thought of God, every thought of creation. Why would you want the crumbs on the table when you can own the table? Why would you want secondary information when you can get direct revelation from the very source itself? Why? Why would you want to be something other than what your creator created you to be, as an infinite, impersonal, and self-aware being that has all the potential, all the power, all the infinite awareness and knowledge and consciousness that is endless? And so this whole idea, this whole idolatry, this whole idol idea has to do with this limited and separate self that's born in a body, that's doomed to suffer. Right? We see the whole history of humanity, where one is born and one dies, and in between there's what? There is limitation. There is this idea of separation. There's this idea of body identification. There's this idea that we're all doomed to suffer, and that we will all end our life in death. This is an idea that has been played out over and over again. And this is the idea that all of us play into until we wake up to the truth, to realize that we are separate and apart from this idea. And so it says it is this idea of being born in a body, doomed to suffer, and life ends with death. Have you ever thought that way? Have you ever thought of yourself that way? Of course you have. You have no other choice until you are brought into what? Enlightenment. Until you're brought into an expanded awareness that that's not who you are. That's not what life is really about. That is not really what's going on. That is not the perspective. That's not the reality. That is not your truth. That is not your identification. You are not a body. You are aware of a body that you're able to express your essence in, but you are not that. You are not your car in the garage. You're not your refrigerator. You're not your clothes. You're not your just anything. Just think about any and everything around you, all that's in the objective world that you have attracted to yourself. You are none of those things. These are just what you have attracted to yourself and have identified them as yours, but that's not who you are. And so it says, it is the will of the ego and its idolatry and its symbol of limitation and separation that sees the will of God or the will of love or the will of truth or the will of reality. So this whole idea of separation and idolatry and seeing ourselves as a body doomed to suffer in the end in death. It says this is a will that we have made. This is an idea that we have embraced. As a separate will than from the one will of God. But it says here that this will that sees the will of God as an enemy. And notice that the ego will sees death and separation and suffering and limitation and birth. And here it says that this will of the ego sees God as an enemy. So this idea of death and separation sees the idea of life and oneness as an enemy. Because that's what the will of God is. The will of God is our oneness. The will of God is our eternal life. The will of God is our happiness, our joy, our peace, our fulfillment, our full expression, our abundance of experience, our sharing with one another, the one life that we share. That's what the will of God is. But here it says, here's the will of an ego. And it says that the ego sees God's will as an enemy. And it takes on a form, it says that the ego takes on a form in which it is denied. And so the ego it denies the will of God. So when we see ourselves from the perspective of limited and separation and born as a body and doomed to suffer and to end our life and death, it said this is the will of the ego. And it said it is this ego that thinks that the will of God is an enemy. And it takes on a form. And we become what? We become the ones that live out that idea. And it carries us to a place of sin consciousness, guilt, and fear, because we are what they call acting as imposters. This is not who we really are. This is not who we really are. That we walk around with thorns, with thorns on our heads. That penetrates our minds and our thoughts and our feelings and our emotion, that we're never comfortable here. Never comfortable in our body experience. Because we have this mindset and this idea of being these separate, individuated selves based on what? Competition and comparison. Comparing ourselves one with another, seeing ourselves as inferior and or superior to another. All of this is part of the ego construct. We constructed this idea. This is not a God idea, but it is a idea that was born out of fear, out of separation and belief that we're separate from one another and separate from God. These are the weird things that happens when we lose our way, when we leave home and go on a prodigal journey. These are the weird things that happens. And we have a whole history of them, and we still see them happening in so many different forms. We are going to set the record straight in this teaching, so you'll know whether you be or whether you are being your true self, your true God divine self, or are you making a choice to play out the ego's role of this separated, individuated, limited self that lives in fear and sin consciousness and guilt, and from a place of scarcity and lack, seeing itself as a body with a beginning and an end. That is a fearful state to be in. I know I lived that for 20-something years until I woke up to the truth of who I was. And many still are asleep to that reality. Many are awakening every day to the truth of who they are. And it's a glorious thing. It's a glorious thing to see one transformed by the renewing of their mind. It is a glorious thing to see my brother or see my lost self, because my brother or my sister is myself. It's just a sign. It's just a symbol. And so the ego is the proof. The ego, or the idea of an ego self, is proof that strength is weak. This is what it proves, that strength is weak and that love is fearful, because it tells you that you're weak, and it tells you that love is not real, that hatred and weakness is what's real, and that we better protect ourselves. So we better give our allegiance over to this idea of separation, so that we can see ourselves as superior over another, so that we don't be taken out, but that we'll take out others before we're taken out. This whole idea of kill or be killed comes from this idolatry idea of a separated ego self. All the killing, all the wars, all the sickness, all the disease, all the pain, all the suffering, all the lack, all the starvation, all the disasters, everything that you have seen or heard or experienced or even read about or even looked upon that is contrary to life and life more abundantly, it comes from out of this idea of an ego self, of a personal separated self. And it puts down the idea of oneness and the idea of love, of universal love. It puts down the idea of equality. It puts down every thought of God and creates a world like we've seen. It creates an idea. It creates systems to keep this ego idea going. It creates an entire thought system where one thinks of himself as a separated entity, as one thinks of himself as separate from all others and from his creator, where one thinks of himself as inferior and separated and limited and vulnerable and subject to death at any moment. That's where it all comes from, the ego idea. And so, see, it goes far beyond the word, the term, the idea of ego goes far beyond just a psychological term. It goes all the way back to the tiny mad idea where somehow, somewhere, some way, we entertained the idea that we were separate from God and separate from one another. And out of that idea, we call it the ego idea. We call it the tiny mad idea of an ego self. It goes all the way back to where we entertain this idea that we're separate from God, that we're not God. And we see the damnable history that it has created. But at the same time, we know the power of love. We know the power of oneness. We have tasted of it. We have seen it in operation. We know its power. We know when two come together in unity and in oneness, there's nothing that they cannot do. But because we've been so highly developed in our own self, in our own egotistical self, that it has put blinders and has put a huge gulf in between us and the experience of our reality. And so humanity suffers. Humanity continues to suffer. And so the ego is the proof that strength is weak and love is fearful, and that life is really death. And what opposes God alone is true. So what the ego basically said is God is not real, love is not real, reality is not real. You only have one way out of this, and that is become the ambassador for separation. Become the ambassador for inequality. He says your only way out of this is to become the ambassador, become the representative, to let your life represent the fact that what love has lost its power, that love is not a reality, that God is not a reality, that we're all doomed to death. We're all doomed to having no awareness and no consciousness. We're like the rock. We're like the flower, that it comes and it goes, it dies and it withers and it no longer exists. That's the whole idea behind the ego. It says eternity is not reality. Love is not reality. Your eternalness is not a reality. Your infinitude is not a reality. So that is what is really at stake. That is what is really going on behind the scene. That is what the whole dramatic event called humanity in life has been about. Your identity, your true self. Whether or not what God the Creator has created is true or not. And so it says, everything that is in opposition to love, everything that is in opposition to life, that is what ego is. And ego says life and love is not real. So you better come over here where the winners are. You better come over here where you can have some semblance of a life, some semblance of joy and happiness by gathering up these things, or by being in this team or in this group and separating from all others. And so the ego is insane, because that's an insanity. The ego is insane or insanity. It fears, it stands beyond the everywhere. In other words, the ego saying, I am separate and apart of this thing y'all call God. I'm separate and apart from reality. So in here it says, it fears, it stands beyond, in fear. Notice now the ego is insane and it is in fear. So insanity and fear comes from that thought idea. So when you experience insane thoughts, insane ideas, or even the feeling of fear or the notion of fear. No, it is coming from you giving some devotion to an false idea, an idea of separation, an idea of limitation. It's coming from your thoughts. It has nothing to do with your birth certificate. It has nothing to do with the country you're born in or what gender or bodysuit you're in. It has nothing to do with your race, your creed, your color, your religion, your political affiliation. It has nothing to do with any of those things. Your pedigree, your history, your family, you know, it has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with an idea that you're holding about yourself and about others that is determining your results, that is determining your emotional state, your mental state, your psychological state, your physical state. And when you hold on to an idea of separation and inferiority or superiority or separation or fear or guilt or sin consciousness or all these things that have been passed upon us, and if you believe in these ideas and these things, these ideas are the source of your suffering, of your fear, of your sickness, of your anguish, of your limitation, of your malfunction. It doesn't come from any other where. It's not coming from the outside. Life is an inside out reality experience. It's not an outside in. Life is not happening to you, but you are projecting in life your beliefs, your devotions, your idols, my idols. This is the clarity that we need in order to what? To make the proper adjustment, the proper alignment, to get back to the place of our what? Original oneness, our original state, which is peace. To enjoy and experience the abundant life that Jesus came and told us that he came to unfold to us, this abundant life, and that we can have this life and have it more abundantly. It comes through the knowledge of the truth. Grace and peace is multiplied through knowledge, the accurate knowledge, the revelation knowledge that comes from God only. And the revelation of God that comes from God only is not confined to a book or a people or a religion or a political party or a country or a nation or a city or an idea. It is boundless. It is without limitation. It is an infinite awareness that is within all of us. And it's formless and timeless. Even the Course in Miracles, it is but a tool. It is but a pointer to point us to the truth. I just happen to love it because what? Because it doesn't get you all caught up in the history. It just gives it to you straight. Like I used to like to drink straight. It gives it to you straight. And I still like to drink straight. Let's get that straight. There's nothing like being free. I'm telling you. But guess what? As free as I am, I'm going to have to cut this broadcast. Why? Because I have another appointment. So we're going to do a third part to this thing on ego. But I've given you enough for today for you to think about and for you to come to an awareness of the prison that you have created for yourself and for others by holding this egoic idea of limited, separate self that is born in a body doomed to suffer and to end in death. And that this is the will that is a true will over the will of God. And that it is opposed, or that God is opposed, or it is opposed to the truth. And I said that it is insane, and that it in fear it stands beyond everywhere, apart from all, in separation from the infinite. That's what the ego is. The ego says, no, I'm over here by myself. So one way you know that you're operating in that thought system is that you go into isolation. Ego loves isolation. It is a sign that you're listening to the wrong voice. You go into isolation. Nobody's right but me. Nobody's right but me. No, you ever thought that? Nobody's right? I know you felt it. Nobody's right but me. Nobody's listening to me. If you would just listen to me. I have all the answers. You ever thought that way? That just let you know. You're in isolation. You're in separation. We got it right. Everybody else got it wrong. If it's our way or the highway, if it ain't our way, you're going to hell. That's an ego idea. That is an egoic idea. If you don't live in our country, we are the superior country. You're the inferior. All these ideas are insane, as it said. It's an egoic idea. And they're running the roost. They're running the country. They're running, in many cases, they're running our lives. They're running our homes. They're running our businesses. They're running the teams. It is insanity. In its insanity, it thinks it has become a victor over God himself. And in its terrible autonomy, it sees the will of God has been destroyed, its dreams of punishment, and trembles at the figures in its dreams, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. This is the way the ego thought system is set up. This is the way it is designed for all of its devotees. And all of us at some level has been devoted to the ego. Even you can even be awakened to the truth, but you can still choose to be egotistical. So let's talk about it more in depth on tomorrow, because I have to go. But you can bet your bottom dollar I'll be back with part 3 of What is the Ego. Don't miss it. It's going to be good. It's going to help you. It helps me. It will be helpful to all of us. Love you so much. See you tomorrow. Bye.